Hello and welcome back to another live episode of More Than a Business. I am your host, Mitch Case. I am also the co-owner of a company called More Than a Meal, where we help organizations strengthen their most valued relationships, their employees and clients, by showing gratitude and appreciation one meal at a time. You might notice that I am off campus today. We are out traveling because of the holiday, but still wanted to make a unique and special episode today of a friend of mine that we just recently got connected and is doing some amazing things, both in entrepreneurial space, and then I'll let him dive into a little bit of what he's currently got going on. But before we jump into that, I just want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart of continuing to show up every single week to watch this show. I was doing the numbers, and we just had an amazing attendance for this, both live viewers and the reach itself. So I'm incredibly grateful for you guys to continue to show up when I had this vision of just truly highlighting individuals that are doing amazing things inside of Kansas City and outside of Kansas City in the business space, where they truly are building an organization that is more than just a business. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart as we kind of wrap up this year. Also want to give a very big thank you to True Captive for being a sponsor of this show from the very beginning. They believe in healthcare that is personal and insurance that is not complicated. If that kind of triggers anything for you guys, I'd love for you to kind of reach out, go to their website at truecaptive.com. If you can't find them there, just shoot me a message. I'd get you connected with them and their leadership team. They're a great organization to know and partner with. So I'm greatly appreciative of that. All right. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring our guest in here, Mr. Cory Scheer. Cory, welcome to More Than a Business Live.
Thank you, Mitch. Happy holidays. It's good to be with you today.
Happy holidays. I know we just kind of finished up talking about the holidays, and I'm on my fourth and final Christmas, but we are incredibly glad to keep the show going. And I did want to make this kind of a special episode because you've got something that you just did really recently, which we are going to dive into. But before we go about doing that, I want to make sure anybody that's tuning in live, go ahead and shoot into the comments where you're watching from. I can't tell you if you're coming from LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. Go ahead and put it in the comments where you're coming from. Happy holidays, whatever that may be. And if you have any questions for myself or Cory as we continue to go through this show, shoot them in the comments and we'll make sure to do that. I'll go ahead and pop up our names here too, because I just realized I didn't have that live. But with that, Cory, what we always do with this show is start off with an impact story. So maybe tell us a story, a personal story that you have of the impact that either you have had through just your past experience or with TrustCentric, and how you have made a positive impact on a community member or maybe even a client.
Yeah, I'm grateful to share that, just because of the work that we do around the concept of trust and the importance of trust. There's lots of different stories, but one that stands out to me is there was a client, and the CEO had the courage to be able to, they took the assessment that we do in our organizational trust assessment, which, when you take an assessment and you're the CEO of an organization, you're kind of putting yourself out there. And I even, before I share the results with clients, I typically would say something like, are you absolutely sure that you want me to give these results to you? And whether they're bad or good, or they exceed your expectations or whatever, because once we give these results to you, you are now accountable to those results. Like, you have held the mirror up in front of your face, you've done the MRI, and now it's your choice whether or not you want to do a deep dive into making this better, or stay with the status quo, or see the results and ignore them, whatever the case may be. Well, this particular CEO embraced the opportunity, took the assessment. I gave him the results. The results were not what he had hoped for, but what he shared with me was, he said, for the first time, I'm now seeing on paper what I've been sensing all along. And he said, the data that we have now given and that we've taken the assessment for, this data is now both helpful and hopeful. And that word hopeful has really stayed in my mind over the past many months as we've continued to work with more and more clients, because even though it may just feel like an assessment, or it may feel like a professional development workshop, or it's another team meeting or another discussion about workplace culture, it's still very important. And our data shows that it's now more important than ever in so many different industries. But that word hope, in addition to it being helpful, was really impactful for me. And it was fuel for me to continue to do this work to the very best of my ability in a way that is helpful to the organizations that we serve. So that was a very significant moment for me.
I love how it's just even just that simple word, hopeful. I can see a lot of people maybe even using that for like their word of the year or something along those lines. Because if you are trying to change something within an organization and being vulnerable in that space, like I mean, it might be even to its core, just like if there is no hope, nobody's going to believe in what you're trying to accomplish or what you're doing. So establishing that and just helpful and hopeful can be big. Kudos to that CEO for being
Yes.
so vulnerable, because I know many leaders in Kansas City, including myself, when sometimes you just don't want anything behind that curtain. You're like, I don't want everybody to know how wild and crazy my life actually is. And like, I have my stuff together, but when you peel that back, there's so many layers of just doubt, questions, imposter syndrome, all those different things that start funneling in and you have no control over. And hopeful is just such a powerful word. So I really appreciate you sharing that story with us, Cory. I might have stolen a word where I wanted to transition in a little bit and talking about just, let's just use kind of the realness of it and imposter syndrome at times. And let's dive into why you decided to actually write a book. So for those of you that aren't aware, Cory just released his book, and it is Bridging the Trust Gap, correct?
Yeah, it's closing trust gap.
Closing.
Same,
I'm so sorry.
Same concept, but yep, closing the trust gap, and just released it at the end of November. And I've learned a lot in the last several months. And I'm still probably not fully through processing the experience, but I think there are a few reasons why I wrote the book. Number one, I wanted to in some way continue the work that I had done through some of my graduate level work. Like, I didn't want it to just end with walking across a stage of graduation. I really wanted to continue that work. So coming off of my doctoral work, continuing the conversation, and then now formalizing it with this book has been it's been an incredible experience. It was a way for me to also go deep on some of the national research that I did with a very close friend of mine named Kurt Bartolich, who he owns an organization called Brand Certain, and he specializes in brand repositioning using quantitative data and assessment. And the work that he does is brilliant. And so he invited me in to co-author this survey with him. And when we got the results back, we were just like, we've got to share this. And so I chose to share this in book format. I also wanted the book to be something that would be, in a way, a bit of a manifesto for the work that my company does, which is called Trust Centric. And that has been really helpful, more helpful than I would have expected, because I think it's given me a lot more focus in the work that I do with my clients. But then it's also, somebody told me that writing a book is like the best possible business card. When you have lunch with somebody, or if you're on a Zoom call, and to wrap it up, you ask them if you could just send them a book in the mail. And, for the cost of a book and some postage, it's so worth it to be able to give that to somebody. And there's just something about the physical rendering of content in a book. And I think it's kind of timeless. And so I've had a goal for a long time to write a book. I think I've stopped and started maybe a few times with different topics, but this really came together. And honestly, there's probably no way that I could have written my book without the help of the organization that I partnered with. They're called Streamline Books, and Will Severns.
Yes, shout out to Will.
He was critical in that. He was the one that really shared with me their process, and it was a 16-week writing process. I worked with Will, and then my development editor named Jennifer Glover, who was amazing. And we had a timeline and deadlines. And even when I didn't want to write 3,000 words that week, I was held accountable to that. And we got it done. We got it done in 15 weeks and 5 days. So I had 2 days to spare.
Wow. Cory, one, congratulations. I know that's not an easy feat. And like you just mentioned, like, you're putting it out there for a lot of people to read, and can be a very vulnerable space. I'm not sure if do you know John Ruhlin?
I don't.
He's the author of Giftology, and what he always talks about is leaving a very memorable experience. So he hates people gifting around Christmas because everybody gifts around Christmas. From a business perspective, it doesn't leave any sort of memorable impact. He hates gifting food because people maybe have allergies and stuff. I will one day let John know that people get to pick our meals versus we shipping meals. But the biggest thing that I always think about, he talks about like that impression you get when you hand somebody a business card. Everybody has this paper business card that they hand to them, and it's just everybody does it. He goes out and buys it is a metal business card that costs him $5 or $10. And he says, I will hand it to them because they will remember it because it costs $5 or $10. So when you were talking about just being able to hand that book over, you will leave a lasting impact, especially if they choose to open that up and read it and go through those first couple of chapters as I did, and see how much passion you have about this. So let's dive into the book a little bit here, and maybe like circling, obviously trust is the overarching theme of this entire book. And it sounds like maybe you got some of that information back from the survey that you guys took.
Yeah.
Share with us maybe some of the big things that you've seen come from that, maybe some of the ideas in your book that maybe somebody that's a business owner or an HR executive might be able to take away and learn a little bit from.
Yeah, when Kurt and I deployed that survey, it went out to about 1,800 participants. And then when we got the data back and Kurt processed that data and then he shared those results, and I helped write specifically the trust questions. He focused his questions on more of the brand side of a business, and then I focused more on internal employee and team trust. But there were several data points that really stood out. One that was honestly probably the inspiration for the book was this data point that said that the perception of trust between the leader of an organization and somebody at that frontline level or that individual contributor level of an organization, or these are the individuals that they're customer facing. Typically they're doing a significant amount of the work that is so vital for the organization, but they're probably the furthest people from being in the boardroom or in the executive room than anybody else, but yet their role is just as important as everybody else. But what we measured was the gap in trust between the perception of trust that the leader had of themselves and that the frontline employee had of that leader. And we dimensionalized it, and that gap was 31%. And so just that idea that if I'm a CEO of an organization of 100 people and I ask that CEO, how much is trust and is it important to you, or how high is the level of trust within your organization, and they say it's an 8. Well, our data suggests that then the frontline employees are probably thinking like it's more around a 5. And that gap, there's so much that can occur within that gap. And there's quiet quitting and the great resignation and the low productivity and the low advocacy and some of the toxic work dynamics that can occur. Those are all things that begin to form within that gap when there's a lack of understanding of where individuals are at on a team or within an organization. And so that was really what prompted it. And then the more we dug deeper into some of the other national research that's out there, we just realized, and also from our data, that trust is really at a very critical stage. It's kind of in an epidemic right now where nearly every industry, if you look at it over the course of the last several years, it's just on the decline with engagement, advocacy, retention for employees, and then overall work culture. And so as a result of that, and also just from lots of different conversations that I've had, I've consistently found that leaders and organizations have a difficult time defining what trust actually is, and then having a shared framework of how do you deconstruct that concept, this universal truth of trust, into really manageable parts. And then once you've done that, how do you assess that trust? And then once you've assessed it, what do you do with it? How do you actually move the needle to strengthen trust in the organization? And so that's what we do in the work that Trust Centric does, but it's also really what the book is about, where we talk about the epidemic of distrust. We talk about this concept that I introduced called the trust proposition, which is similar to the value proposition, but the value proposition takes action on the worth of something, whereas the trust proposition takes action on the truth of something. Both are vital for the customer experience. And then we move into the framework that we call the structure of trust. And then from there, we talk about how does this impact the people in your organization and also the policies and the practices? And then one of the fun parts about the book, the very last part of the book, I think I've got like 9 or 10 pages of just trust quotes from all sorts of individuals. And my thought was, this is like the Cliff Notes version, to where even if people flip all the way to the back and they need some trust quotes for their upcoming PowerPoint presentation, then we'll let this be their
Hey,
guide.
there we go.
They skip past all of the stuff that I wrote.
I love that. Yeah, I'll have to skip to the back there every once in a while, throw those up for inspiration. Cory, just like sticking to the book right now, I know this was just released. It was an Amazon bestseller. Congratulations on that. If
Thank you.
anybody we don't want to obviously give out all the secrets, so I highly encourage anybody to go out and get this book, deep dive in it. Cory's done a lot of research. His company is a great option as well. But Cory, what's where would they go to get this book? What kind of options does anybody have?
Yeah, so 2 ways. Number one, you can just go to Amazon and search for the book, Closing the Trust Gap, or you can go direct URL, which is just trustgapbook.com. And it's, I call it a round trip flight book. I intentionally did it. It's to where if you were to take off in Kansas City and fly to Southern California, by the time you got back home from your beach vacation in San Diego, you'd be done with the book. I didn't want it to be super thick. I wanted it to be substantive, but also very approachable. And because the subtitle says it all, it's called Taking Action on What Matters Most for Leaders, Teams, and Organizations. And so that phrase, if we don't take action with the things that we learn, then it just becomes more of an exercise in kind of a mental exercise or an academic exercise. But I wanted to create an opportunity for people to really take action on something that can often be elusive or maybe a little bit squishy or ethereal. And I wanted to make it more tangible and tactical so people could really hold on to that and then have a shared understanding of trust with their team.
Yeah, that's one of those like personal development skills that you're just not able to just sit down and read some things and practice and all of a sudden you have trust. I think that's definitely a work of art, and it's something that is built over time versus immediately, but it's such an important foundation. I want to add to maybe a third way that people can get a hold of this book is if they were to go and tell their leadership team that Cory actually does some keynote speaking, and maybe that book will be provided to you because you have already booked one of these because of your book. So maybe tell us a little bit more on your speaking side of things, Cory.
Yeah, I love the speaking side of the work that we do. I really enjoy interacting with audiences, whether they're there for a conference or a convention, or maybe it's a team for the organization. Either way, there's such a unique opportunity there to have an honest conversation around some of the challenges that every workplace culture faces, that, trust is something that can be broken so easily. It oftentimes can take a long time to repair, maybe not even ever fully to the same way. However, there are also opportunities, even within a 20 or 30-minute conversation collectively as a group, where we're talking about trust, to where it is a trust building activity. And I guarantee I never do trust falls in my keynotes. It's the number one question that I get. I never do them. In fact, there's research that shows that trust falls are pretty damaging actually to trust for people. But
is that real?
It is. And
I think we've all seen too many of those TikToks and Instagram reels.
Yes, way too many of those. But we do it's an honest conversation. It's emotional and it's vulnerable in an appropriate way, because we've got to be able to evoke some of the real significant challenges that come along with a toxic workplace so that we can avoid it or move out of a toxic workplace as quickly as possible. So we roll up our sleeves and we get down to business. And my hope is that it's helpful and meaningful and memorable so that people can, just like with the book, so they can take action on it and do something about making their trust dynamic even stronger in their organization.
I love that. I have not yet seen you speak live, but just from the conversations we've had, I would be willing to bet a lot of time, effort, and energy that would be entertaining, impactful, and you would walk away with some absolute gold nuggets from that. So yeah, if you guys are going into this new year and looking for maybe some keynote speakers for conferences or even just with your business, I would highly recommend Cory. I know there's a bunch of other people that would stand behind that as well. So Cory, I wish you the best of luck this next year with the book and the keynote side of things. But let's talk about the other thing you got going on. You've started this business now that's been going on for 9 months, Trust Centric. You continue to show up day in and day out. And obviously we know that there are good days and there are bad days. And then there are just horrible days in the entrepreneurial world. So let's kind of dive into, what continues to motivate you to show up when things are great. And honestly, man, when things are just, not looking the way that they want them to be, and serve the people that you're blessed to serve.
And you're right, Mitch. And I think sometimes all of those dynamics, that roller coaster can actually take place even within a day, which is terrifying on certain days where you wake up, you feel good about your day, and then maybe you've got a couple of meetings that fall through, and so then you kind of go down, and then you'll get an email that says, "Hey, sorry for the delay. We've been looking at the proposal. We're all in. We can't wait to get started." And you're like, "That's amazing." And then at the end of the email, it's like, "Can we get started next week?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh." So it's just, but I think I've really learned to just appreciate that and recognize the gift of every day not being exactly the same. But the other thing that I've learned in order to help kind of temper some of that is, and even now, really 9 months into this work full time, is there does need to be some standardization. There needs to be some consistency in your approaches. It may not necessarily have to be rigid, but it can't be custom every single day. You can't do it. I think you can do that starting out because you're trying a lot of things, but then there comes a point where you have to come up with a refined process, and that process is consistent in everything that you do. So for us, we always begin with an assessment. We then move to the framework called the structure of trust, and then we work to build a plan, some kind of an action item or an action plan. And we do that, or I do that with my keynotes. I do that with workshops, with my consultative engagements, and then even with my executive coaching. So that same process has been really vital. And then also having a clear understanding of your pricing and how you approach the conversation of pricing, being open to negotiation, working to get to the second conversation about pricing, and just being upfront and saying, how does this fit within your budget? How does this feel to you? Do you have any concerns about this? And let's continue to have the conversation. And ultimately, what I want to do is I want to earn the right to have the next conversation, whether it's in a discovery call or deep into a negotiation or a client that's looking to renew their work. If I can earn the right to have the next conversation, I feel like I'm doing what I need to be doing. And those are just some things that I've learned over the last 8 months. And then the last thing I would say is surrounding myself with a critical network of help. This is my inner circle. These are my advisors. These are the people who they will be completely honest with me. They will caution me. They will push me. But I think it's nearly impossible to do this alone. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a large staff, but it means that you have to have a network of help. And if you don't, I think that you're really at risk of burning out quickly.
I would echo that last sentiment 1000%. I even just my spouse being one of those individuals, to a couple of the team members that we have, to even an advisory board that just can shoot you straight when you need to be picked up off of your butt, and or some tough love to keep things moving forward. So Cory, I definitely wish you the best going into 2024 with this new company, this brand new book, getting into the keynotes. I'm incredibly excited for you and glad to be on the side cheering you on through all of this. If anybody wants to chat with you, whether that is have some questions about the book, maybe interested in some keynote side of things, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, 2 ways. Active on LinkedIn, so they can look at my name on LinkedIn and just send me a connection, and I'll respond right away with that, and we can DM, or they can certainly go to my website, trustcentricconsulting.com, and either fill out a web form, a contact me form, or you can send me an email at Cory, Cory, at trustcentricconsulting.com.
Yeah, and I'll just say again, if anybody has any challenges getting a hold of Cory, I'll be a resource for them as well to get you guys connected. You've got Mr. David Komar He is saying congrats on the book, Cory. Not sure if you're connected with David. He's an amazing, amazing leader here in KC. And Jonathan Jones, I popped it up earlier while you were talking, but we got one buyer for the book here.
Yeah, thank you.
Jonathan runs an amazing organization and is somebody that would resonate a lot with the book that he will be reading very shortly. So, Cory, we're kind of nearing the end here. One of the things that my wife and I always wanted to make sure we do is just by showing our own gratitude and appreciation is allowing you to send a meal to anybody that you think would be deserving of that, whether going through some of life's most joyful things or maybe some of the things in life that can be really, really challenging. So I invite you to share who that may be and as much or as little as you would like on why you want to send them a meal.
Sure. When I received that question in preparation for this show, the name that immediately popped into my mind was a friend and a mentor and an incredible leader in Kansas City named Marvin Daniels. Marvin is the executive director for an incredible organization called the Hope Center KC. And he's been at that organization for well over 12 or 13 years now. And they've grown this incredible team. They do amazing work. They have so many services that they provide to the community members that the Hope Center KC is located. And Marvin is somebody that I think would be tremendously blessed by your gift of generosity. And Marvin is somebody that has really taught me a lot about generosity and the role that we all play in strengthening a community to make it one that is flourishing. And so Hope Center KC, if people are not familiar with it, I would encourage you to check it out and see the incredible work that they're doing right now.
Awesome. Cory, like selfishly, I always love when we get to gift this to somebody that's doing work. Well, let's be honest, probably more important than you and I are doing in our daily work. So excited to make sure that Marvin gets that. We'll get connected offline here and make sure we can get that out to him. That pretty much wraps up our show, Cory. I always like to just kind of leave last words. If you've got anything you want to add, otherwise I'll go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, I would say we touched on this in the pre-show, but one of the things I would just encourage your listeners, I would say that everybody has a book in their heart or their mind or a combination of both. And maybe 2024 is the year that you either declare that you're going to write something down or you begin writing, or even if you wrote 50 to 100 words a day, if you did that consistently over the course of several months, you would take a pretty good chunk out of a potential book. And so I just want to encourage your listeners that if you're sensing that, or if you've got something that you want to write about, and even if you want to reach out to me just to hear more about my journey and the challenges, but also some of the things that have been so amazing, I'd be happy to do that. But I kind of want to encourage and push your audience to take that step into that and to explore that, because although it was a challenging experience for me, I can't even say how grateful I am that it's, number one, over, but number two, what a blessing it's been. I could have never imagined, even within 4 weeks of publishing the book, it's already been so worth it. And we're just getting started. So I just want to challenge your audience, like, write the book, write the page, write the paragraph, get started.
Maybe that's the book. Just write the book.
Write the book.
I like that. This reminded me one more thing, and you have to do it in less than 30 seconds. What do you have coming out here in 2024 that we should be keeping an eye out for?
The podcast is coming in 2024. I've already got guests lined up. Mitch, you're going to be a part of that for sure as a guest, and it's going to be called the Closing the Trust Gap podcast. So I can't wait to launch that in 2024.
I love it. You have so many things going on already. I can just see the momentum going, Cory. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on this show. And for the rest of you guys, we will be back on Thursday next week in the beginning of the new year at 3 p.m. Central Time. So until then, I wish you guys a very, very happy new year. And I encourage you to continue strengthening your most valued relationships. With that, we are out, Cory. Take care.
Thank you.